And today we're going to be talking about contact center experiment ideas. We've talked about both contact centers and experiments in the past, but today's discussion is a little bit different. Lately there's been a lot of chatter about contact centers, primarily because customer acquisition costs are going up, which is one of the reasons why we have these calls. But because customer acquisition costs are going up, the need to be able to retain customers rather than acquire customers has become more important. And at the heart of that strategy is really the contact center. That's the medium through which customers experience and how they evaluate the actual experience with any given company. And so a lot of times if we can help companies achieve a better contact center solution, then we're going to be able to help them grow their business effectively. So if you haven't heard the experimental sales strategy, it's on YouTube. You can check it out on the channel. But essentially what experiments does is it changes the nature of the sales conversation. What it does is it removes one of the biggest challenges that we face as sales reps, which is really the fear factor of adopting something new. But when you label the adoption of new technology or solutions as an experiment, it makes it much easier for the customer to digest the idea of switching or changing something. And it may be a temporary solution so that they can try it. But again, the experiments both removes the fear, but it also helps them become the champion, because if it does work, they can take credit for it. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't look bad on them either. And so whenever we're approaching sales, it needs to be approached as a sales experiment. You'll find the adoption rate is much higher. Now, along the lines of experiments, there's a great segue between the last sales call that we did around awards. Awards is essentially where we can track metrics around companies, find companies that are performing better than others. And one of the great ways that we can do this is measuring wait times within contact centers. And so if we're looking at providing awards, this would be a great opportunity to do that, but especially for the companies that are struggling, the ones that are at the bottom of the list, rather than providing them with awards, we can provide them with experimental ideas and talk to them about ways they can improve their contact center experiment and help them understand the impact that it's having on their business. So one of the byproducts of the award research that you perform if you try that specific type of strategy is identifying the companies that are struggling and talk about ways that they can do that better. So if you haven't seen this before, if you go to ensable.com/data, you'll find a section here that's under business filters where we identify companies who are having phone issues. This particular data set isn't huge because it's not something that happens very often. But what we do is we analyze public reviews about the companies and identify any key phrases that would suggest that there's something wrong with their phone service. It may be long wait times or dropped calls or poor call quality. But if we can identify that, you'll be able to segment that. We also have another section within the business filters that identifies companies who have contact center reps based off of past hiring practices. And so you can combine the two or use one or the other and layer on different geographical filters or technology filters. But you may find this helpful when you're building your prospecting list. Again, that's ensable.com/data. Now, the purpose of today's call was to talk about call center experiments. The first place that we want to start are text-enabled DIDs. This is, if you look at people on their phones, people prefer texting over phone calls any day. And so if you can enable this, this not only helps improve the experience that clients would have with your prospects, but it makes it a lot more efficient for them as well. Now, the contact center reps aren't going to be on their phones. Typically, these text-enabled DIDs enables the contact center reps to actually type these responses and interactions directly on their work machines. But what's great is they can talk to multiple clients at once. And if they don't have to pull up account information, they can answer quick and easy questions right away and make it much easier for them. But it also allows them to take the time to give the customer the right response. A lot of times what happens within contact centers is that they're forced to give responses right away because it's a real-time conversation. But with text-enabled conversations, they can maybe ask somebody or better formulate the response or provide links or any information that would be more effective. And so you'll find that the customers, the responses that they get are much more thought out from the contact center rep side, making it much better for the customer. It's also much more convenient both for the rep and for the customer, because now the reps can work from anywhere. They can use this on their machines, on their phones, but it talks about that work-life balance, which helps the reps perform better as well. It also makes it a lot easier to track. you can see how many back and forths did the client have with the rep. If there's too many, if they reach a certain threshold, then it may require intervention or additional training, or maybe something needs to be done. But those are some of the KPIs or key performance indicators that we need to look at. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But you can also have digital versions of the conversations. And on top of that, it would make sense to take those digital conversations and plug them into the conversation AI, which is much more common these days, especially with click-to-chats. When you're talking about costs, customers usually prefer to figure out the solution themselves. They understand how painful it can be to go through a process, to go through a phone tree, and so if they could solve the problem on their own, they're much more, it's much more preferable. But in terms of cost, it's only on average around 7 cents per chat using an AI versus $13 using a human being. And so if you can enable a smart AI, especially using past conversations, those types of interactions become very valuable over time. And again, with the chat, not only can you enable AI with those conversations, but when they do engage with the contact center rep, it's great to use this as part of their downtime. On average, contact center reps has around 76 minutes a day of downtime. And so to help switch things up a little bit for them, chats can be a great way for them to fill in those gaps. It also helps provide additional context to the conversations because you can see where they're at on the page. And so if somebody is on the sales page, you may want to have them talk to the sales team rather than to customer support. Or if they're on a specific product, all that information is so much more valuable to the contact center rep rather than being blindsided by a phone call. It also enables us to have more data. Again, we need that data to make smarter decisions. And so having information flow from the website will enable you to also be able to be smarter about how you schedule your reps. So maybe you can see what types of reps need to be around, what type of volume. But data is so important. So when you're working with contact centers, one of the big things is giving them visibility and being able to create reports that can actually help them, a dashboard in a sense. And so helping improve customer service requires visibility, and gathering data is absolutely necessary for that. And so one of the experiments that you'll be working with is helping them utilize reports and better visibility. And so tying information back from the website, making sure that you gather information about who you're chatting with before you actually chat with them to make sure you archive that. It also helps you optimize skills. Again, if you're going to be talking to somebody on a sales page, you need to be able to put them in front of the sales organization. But also, one of the big things about data, and probably the most important thing, is gamification. The only thing more valuable than money to a contact center rep is reputation. A lot of times money is used as a means of garnishing reputation, but if you can create a shortcut and help them rank themselves using those KPIs, you're going to be able to provide a value that's one of the greatest values to your contact center reps, which will then drive behavior. And so you can't achieve gamification within a contact center if you don't have the data. And that allows you to figure out where you're at, where you need to spend time. And ultimately, what it does is it enables AI, which is one of the most important aspects of lowering customer acquisition costs and providing support when the customer needs it. But in order to achieve true data ubiquitous visibility, you're going to need to involve what we call Zapier. Zapier is a third-party app that is a game changer for contact centers because what it does is it enables you to connect different applications that don't normally talk to each other. And so a lot of times there's lots of great apps that your contact center platform usually works with and talks to, but it's never going to cover everything. But Zapier will give you a much broader breadth of options to connect with. And so in order to have visibility into data sets, so if you need to know what was the latest email that the customer sent over, or what was their latest website visit, or what else happened. And so Zapier will enable you to pull in additional data points into the conversation, into the sales AI, to provide you different additional insights. And ultimately what it does is if you can identify the gaps that exist between your customers and their contact centers and fill those in with Zapier, you can become a true value-added consultant and differentiate yourselves. Also, a really important aspect is it provides omnichannel enablement. So if your customers want to talk on WhatsApp, you can enable that. Or if you need to have different platforms that aren't very common, but your customer base, for whatever reason, uses it, or if they have a specific CRM, Zapier can enable the the contact center reps to talk to the clients on any platform that they choose. It's also great for that data consolidation. But in addition to having greater visibility, it's going to enable you to create triggers. So if your customer calls in and then hangs up because of a long wait time, you can enable triggers to email them and say, I'm sorry we missed you, can we talk to you? Or maybe you create a task, or maybe you create a record that you missed the call into the CRM. So all of these different aspects are great with Zapier because you can use your creativity to differentiate yourself. And that's really what we want to do, because there's, within a lot of different technology spaces, there's so many different options, and it feels like it's hard to be able to differentiate yourself. But Zapier will allow you to create a custom solution that nobody else has come up with, because you're able to think outside of the box. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is try to consolidate data, create triggers, and create a custom experiment that we can help for the clients using applications like Zapier. Now, if you're looking for specific applications that your customer is using to plug into Zapier and see if you can create an experiment, you can go to ensemble.com/data, click on technology, and you can browse through the different technologies that we can identify customers are using to see if you can come up with an experiment that would be interesting for different types of companies that are using those specific types of applications that aren't normally integrated with different contact center platforms. Another area that would provide an excellent experiment is with call transfers. Oftentimes, as you move around a phone tree or from person to person, the individual has to restart the whole data process. They have to explain what the call is about, who they are, re-verify. What that does is it not only costs a lot of money to have to re-verify and re-explain everything because you're spending more time with contact center reps, which requires more time on the phone, but it's also a very painful process for the client. And so if you're able to pull in real-time transcripts, so if you're able to have your contact center transcribe what's going on in the conversations, provide that to the next rep, and also provide all the verification information, then that would make everything so much less painful and also reduce call times. And so this is a great area to spend some time and talk to your prospects about intelligent call transfers, and also be able to do instant caller identification. And so this is all part of that process. So in addition to contact transfers, if you're able to identify who's calling based off of their phone number, that makes it much easier for you to work with the clients and verify the information more quickly. But all of this data should be able to be plugged into an artificial intelligence system, because that's one of the main reasons why we're gathering this information. There's lots of great platforms with IBM or with Google Analytics. A lot of times it's baked into the contact center solution that you're building or working with. But this will help you do better call routing. You can do voice analytics in terms of identifying what tier of support do we need to identify based off of the tone of voice, or with the smart notes or call analytics. So how often have they called in? Who do they usually call into? What is their typical issue? Automatically tracking this information in the CRM, real-time call summaries. That's something we talked about with the transfers. But another big one is real-time error detection. So if keywords are coming up quite often within the conversation in real time, that can raise flags with different managers within the contact center to join the call. So rather than waiting for the contact center rep to actually identify an issue, which a lot of times they won't because they don't want to have to raise flags about that, but if the real-time call analytics can identify that, you can bring managers into the conversation and help them resolve it with the contact center rep. And so all of these different aspects can help create a much more efficient and experience for the customer rep, but a much more enjoyable one as well. And so this is an area that's fairly new and something that would probably catch the attention of your reps and with your prospects to make it a lot easier for them to adopt something like this. Now, you don't have to layer this on across the entire contact center. You would simply get a few extra seats for a few reps and then run the experiment on them and see what the impact is. And that's where we want to finish off here, is the key performance indicators. These are the areas where we want to be able to say, look, this is the experiment, but this is what we're measuring. So you need to find a way to gather this, and most platforms will be able to help you find this information. You can talk with the different vendors to make sure that you know how to measure this so that you can actually identify the impact that your experiment has on the business. But you need to figure out how many calls are taking place per hour. So this would likely be reduced with the click-to-chat or with a text-enabled system or with better sales AI or different support AI systems. Also, you can look at the total number of calls, the average speed to answer. So are we improving that? It's a very big metric the abandonment rate. So are we losing customers just because they don't want to wait? What's the average hold time, the average talk time, and the service level? So how satisfied are our clients, which is ultimately what we're trying to achieve here through these different experiments. But if we can improve those KPIs at the top of this list, the service level will be reflected by that. So ultimately, what we should be able to do is choose a few of these or look at all of them and see how the experiment changes those KPIs. And once we do that, then we can translate that into a dollar amount and talk about expanding this experiment further. But ultimately, when you do achieve a positive experience, this now becomes your greatest sales tool because now you have a case study. You can take this to any other company and say, look, this is what I did for your competitor or for a company in your same industry. This is how I can help them. This is the impact that it has. This is how much we saved, and this is why you need to move over to this new platform. So a lot of times the experiments are just an initial process of research. And every time you implement this solution, it's still going to be an experiment. But the more experiments that you run, the more validity this solution has for future clients. So next time we meet, we're going to be talking about another type of referral partner, which is a software referral partner. A lot of folks overlook this opportunity, but there's huge opportunities within software developers to be able to create solutions and sales. So until then, thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone. Take care.